Hello, 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 and welcome back to Bold Strokes Books Bookathon. This is our third and final day, and this panel is Finding Forever. Your lovely moderator is Melissa Brayden. Two quick things about Zoom, which I'm sure you guys all already know. The gallery view is going to give you the best view of all our panelists. And the Q&A panel is in the bottom middle of your screen. That is where your questions will go. Please use the chat roll for comments and commentary and compliments, but your questions go in the Q&A. All right, you guys, have fun.
All right, thanks so much, Sandy. As she said, I'm Melissa Brayden, and I will be your moderator today. We are going to be discussing Finding Forever, and essentially what that means is on the romantic journey in the romance novels that you know and love, there's a lot that goes into Finding Forever. And so with the panelists here today, I hope to dig into that a little bit. I will tell you that Julie Cannon is being a real trooper, joining us from the road today. She is somewhere between Texas and Louisiana. Is that correct? Oh, well, I'm seeing you nodding, Julie. I'm not getting your audio. You're going in and out. But she has nodded that, yes, she is in transit, and we'll hope she will join us soon. We might have her in and out, just depending on how her signal is. But for today, I have some great questions that I'm hopeful will kick the discussion off. But as Sandy said, below, if you look below our faces, there's a box that says Q&A. And if you have any questions for these panelists, please drop them in there. And then throughout, I'll check in and see what questions we have that we can intersperse. But first, I would like for everybody to go ahead and introduce themselves. Just tell us a thing or two about you in case anybody hasn't read you before or doesn't know who you are. Georgia, why don't you kick us off and tell us who you are?
I am Georgia Beers. How are all of you? I'm so glad that you're all here. This has been so much fun this weekend. I hope you guys are enjoying yourselves. I write contemporary romance. I've been doing this for a long time. I just sent my 27th book off to editing. I have a new book out that just came out last week called Flavor of the Month, and that's it for me.
All right, Megan.
Hi, I'm Ullrich. So happy to be talking books and connecting with people in this time of not so connecting with people. I had my 9th novel just recently come out this month, What the Heart Remembers Most, and that's that on that.
I'm hearing really great buzz about it, so I'm excited to read it.
Me too.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, Leigh.
My name is Leigh Hayes, and I am a new author at Bold Strokes Book, and I just published Providence was in February, and just before everything went sort of sideways. Georgia knows that I was
under the wire.
Yep, just in under the wire. Yeah, and my second book is due out, Too Good to Be True, at the end of this year. So it's been kind of a wild ride.
Yeah, exciting, and you're right on time for all of this, which people need something to do, so you're right there for them, which is fantastic. All right, we have Mary Burns. Tell us a little bit about you.
Under the wire, also like Leigh, with my first book. I have to send the information for this, what I hope will be the second book, to Sandy pretty soon. But Forging a Desire Line is coming out in about a month, I think, or less.
Oh, we're very close to it then, so that's pretty exciting. Are you in New York?
I am indeed.
I thought so. I thought you were a New Yorker. So
yeah.
We have several.
I'm smack across the street from the United Nations.
Oh, right there in the heart of the city.
She's in New York.
Gotcha.
So we have Julie. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Wonderful. We're there.
I couldn't get my microphone to work. It wouldn't.
No, you've done it.
So I'm here now.
You've done it. And so what we've done is we've gone through, and each of the panelists has just told us who they were briefly. Can we ask you to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Julie Cannon, and I just turned into my editor my 20th book at Bold Strokes Books. And I don't know if anyone has thanked everybody that's put this together. Everybody, all the moderators, excuse me. This has been just a great 3 days, and I think it's something that everybody needed. So I'm glad to be here.
We're happy that you're here as well, even traveling, and we appreciate you taking the time to be here with us. So I'm going to leap right in, if that's okay. And just because we're on a Zoom format, I'll try to direct questions specific ways, so we can have you guys jump in right away. And so I'll just say, I imagine we're going to have unique answers to this particular question because everybody's different in what they like to read and what they like to write. We're drawn to different things, but for you, what's an important ingredient to include when writing a once-in-a-lifetime relationship? Something that seems extra special. I mean, does it have to be the physical attraction that comes the most important, or is it the camaraderie? Is it the friendship? Is it the tension? I mean, it could be a million different things, but for you, what is that secret sauce that you refuse to leave out? And I think I'm going to send this one to Megan first, if that's okay.
I'm going to say like dialogue, banter, because I think that builds a relationship so well. And it also kind of highlights character development really well too between the two of them. So I'm going to go with banter, some real good back and forth.
I think that's great because that's also a nod to chemistry, right? And so when you can riff off of somebody, not only is that fun, but there's a little bit of that static electricity.
And whether it's friends to lovers or enemies to lovers, so much shows through the dialogue. So
yes, I think that's a fantastic point. What about you, Julie?
I think what's important to show is that connection that you've never had with anybody else, whatever that may be. It's a feeling, it's a challenge. It could be some anger. It's one of those can't live with them, can't live without them kind of situations. But it's just what makes this individual so much different than everybody before her, and there won't be anybody even that comes close to it after her. I think that's what's the most important.
Oh, I like how you put that. That's fantastic. Leigh, coming to you next. What's your secret sauce?
Well, Julie kind of just stole mine. It's that push-pull that, like,
yes.
Every time I touch you, I get zapped, that kind of same thing. So for me, it's that push-pull. It's like, that deep connection.
That's a great way to phrase it as well, a push-pull. What about you, Mary?
Well, it's that dance, and that comes with, you definitely need the connection. That comes with the conversation, the dialogue, and that dance that the two of you do around each other.
Very good. Georgia?
My first answer to that was chemistry, which I think we've all kind of covered in different ways. I think that there has to be, I think that chemistry encompasses the banter that Megan talked about and the push-pull that Leigh mentioned. And, I think the flirtiness, the flirtation, I think that needs to be natural, and it needs to come across to the reader that can go on endlessly. And I think there's got to be an element of trust. If this is the person they're going to be with forever, then there's got to be that element of, I would do anything for you. I will protect you. I've got your back. You've got my back. That thing. I think that's important as well.
I think that's a very valid point. I am going to grab a question from our Q&A panel, and we had an anonymous reader ask, is it better, or do you prefer a relationship to be more aspirational? In other words, maybe an escape from the real world that people can read about, or do you ground it a little bit more in realism? Mary, what about you? I know you have your first book coming out soon, but when you're going aspirational versus realistic, what did you draw to more?
Realistic. That works more for me. Yeah. It's what I drew on, and I appreciate it as a reader. I like the romance and the pie in the sky part, but I need to know that I could be one of the characters that I read about, or at least be a good friend of theirs. So
to know that it's possible. Yeah.
Very.
Now, Megan, with your books, I think I've read both from you. I think I've read aspirational, but I've also read some really grounded, realistic, gritty stuff. What are you drawn to more, or do you just like to switch it up?
I do like to switch it up, but I gravitate towards the more realistic. I like the more realistic, the gritty, the emotional, because I find I like writing relatable.
Yep. What about you, Leigh?
I think of the word vermilitude. I like it to feel truthy. So sure, they might not all look like, most of us do, but it feels real. So so not just characters, but also like sometimes the work that they do. If you can kind of feel like that's real enough, you know, just something to connect to. But yeah, that's more of what I'm looking for.
All right, Georgia, what's your take on it?
You know, it's interesting because I do feel that romance is an escape. Like when I pick one up to read it, that's why I pick it up to read it, because I want to get out of this life and this world for a little while and just go on the journey with these two people. But I do think there does need to be an element of realism. And I think for me, that mostly comes with the characters themselves. I feel like the characters have to be relatable. And as long as the characters are relatable, then the situation can vary, I think. And if it gets a little bit, if the reader needs to suspend their disbelief a little tiny bit with the plot, I think if they're relating to the characters, then that's okay.
All right, so kind of a mixed bag for you, it sounds like. Yeah. All right, Julie, what about in your work?
I think it's kind of all of the above, what everybody's already said. And I really agree with Georgia. I think I write as true escapism. You know, what are these people? A lot of them are people that are characters that I wish I could be, that I could come up with that Banty Witter. Of course, it takes me 3 days to figure out what that particular comeback is going to be. So it is a little bit of both. You have to have some realism in there. But the thing that I find is really interesting is that, you know, nobody goes to the bathroom. Nobody has a period. Nobody, you know, puts on deodorant. And so you're like, okay, so that is a little bit of escapism and unrealistic as you're going through your day with your character. But so it's kind of a little bit of what everybody has said.
Yeah, I think those were some fantastic answers from you guys. I know that, you know, when we're talking about forever today, when writing romance, there really are a couple different ways you can go to find that forever. And the more traditional is obviously happily ever after. But I think in the past decade or so, we've seen an emergence of another trend, which is happily ever after for now, which is very valid and can be just as satisfying. And so I guess my question to you is, how do you decide whether a couple is going to get happily ever after or for now? And so, Georgia, I know for a fact you've written both. And so I'd like to toss it to you first to say, how do you make that call, or do you just figure it out as you go?
Well, I think there is a large element of figuring out as I go, because as I write, I learn the characters a little more. And I can tell by, you know, 2/3 of the way in whether this is going to be, they're going to get married and have children, or they're going to do a happily ever after for now. And for me, when I write,
and maybe make it there, you know,
exactly. When I write a happily ever after for now, it doesn't mean, but you know, down the road they'll probably break up. It means, you know, they're probably going to be okay. And that for me comes back to an element of realism, because I feel that that's pretty realistic. Now it's interesting because I see in the chat bar that Nuria, and I'm sorry if I didn't say that right, is talking about an epilogue, and that she needs to have that final, did they get married? Do they have kids? And I know that comes across in reviews sometimes. If there isn't that wrapped up in a nice, neat bow, some readers don't like that. But honestly, I don't want every one of my books to end in a nice, neat bow. I like a little bit of variation. And if we're going to get a little personal, I mean, Julie and I touched on this yesterday in our chat. You know, I was married for 22 years and that ended. And so for me, happily ever after for now is realistic. Which doesn't mean that there won't be a happily ever after for me, because there will be. But I feel like my perception and my view of that changed a little bit because of my own personal growth and journey and all of that stuff. So maybe that's why, I'm not quite sure, but I think that both work okay. And it just depends on the characters themselves and what's going to work better for those characters. Does that make sense?
Good answer. I think it does make sense. No, not at all. So Leigh, what's your perspective on the two different endings? Would you be in for either, or do you gravitate more to one?
I'm sorry, me? Yeah.
Yes, Leigh. Sorry,
I've been faded out for a minute. I probably gravitate more to happily for now. My characters tend to be a little more damaged. I like damaged characters, and it takes, you know, like Georgia said, they do often go a certain way, and I can see where they would be in the future. And it doesn't mean they're going to break up, but it means that I might have like a whole nother book to write about their problems.
Sure.
Not that I would, but like yeah. So for me, I tend to gravitate. But sometimes I think that's the current book that's releasing at the end of the year. I definitely see it as more ever after. Like, their journey is over at the end of that book. For that.
Yeah, I think, every couple is different, right? What about you, Julie? You've got 20, so you probably have a mixture there.
Yeah, I do. I'm typically happily ever after, but I do happily ever after for now when I have no idea how they're going to get together. Because there are huge things such as geography. The book I just finished, The Last First Kiss, someone owns a business in Atlanta and someone owns a business in Phoenix, and how are they going to move? Who's going to sell? How are they going to get together? But yet, in the very end, it says, do you really want to be a part of all of this, the situation? And she says, yes, I absolutely do. And I could have left it right at that, because that's the whole typical ending of a romance. At least they need to declare their love or commitment to each other. So, but Nuria, if you're looking for an epilogue, I have an epilogue in there. So it's like about 8 years later, here's where they are. It doesn't say how they got to the same place, how they live in the same house, because I couldn't figure that out, but it works. So a lot of it just depends on how they do ultimately join their lives together.
All right. And Mary, on your novel, which direction did you go and what inspired you?
Well, what inspired me was my own life. Like Georgia, my happily ever after ended with the first relationship, which was 14 years long. So my protagonist is 50, and she's looking back at this 25-year relationship that has ended 3 years later, and she's not ever going to have anything going forward. And of course, that's going to change in the book. But I'm of two minds. I mean, I had an argument with my editor about happily ever after or not. And of course, her advice was, this is what your readers are picking up the book for, which I know, because I do also. But I think happily ever after for now is also, something good to settle with, because I don't always know where characters are going in the books that I read.
Right.
You just sort of have to decide for yourself.
Yeah, the navigating those waters is probably what makes it unique and interesting. Megan, what about you?
I definitely gravitate towards happily ever after, period. I love a good epilogue. I usually write an epilogue, but I do have 2 second chance romances, which I think are a little bit different when it comes to like the happily ever after, because it's more of like a happily ever after, this time for sure.
We got it right.
So it's a little bit different, but I usually lean towards happily ever after.
That's a very valid point with the second chances. It's like, oh, we screwed it up before, but here we go.
Not this time. This time we've got it.
Okay, let's grab a Q&A from the bar here. Nancy is asking, and this kind of goes to our first question. We talked about the secret sauce, and we kind of agreed collectively that chemistry was a pretty big deal. And so she's asking, how do you write characters to show that they have good chemistry? So what are some things, some tools that you pull out to say, hey, these two, there's a snap, crackle, pop happening there? And tell you what, Mary, I'm going to come to you first. How do you show chemistry on the page? And I'm sure everyone will have their own way.
Oh, Lordy. Well, it's, the first moment that whichever character is, going to be the one falling in love sees the other one. I mean, that's a moment that you have to work with very carefully. And then, of course, the back and forth, the snappy dialogue, to let your readers know that, either they're frenemies or whatever, but they're going to fall in love. But it's that, I think for me, it's that first moment.
Oh, yeah, it does tell a lot, right?
Yeah.
For sure. Megan.
Oof, I agree with first moment with what Mary said, for sure. But I also think in that beginning part, I'd say like that first third, the real like internal feelings that you're writing, whether you write first or third person, whichever way you go, but sort of like how your character is thinking and handling it. I think you show a lot through that. whether it's how they talk to their friends, what they bring up to their secondary characters and stuff. I think that plays a big part in it too, because you see how their mindset is changing.
Yeah, I completely agree with that as well. Leigh, chemistry, what do you think?
It's banter for me. It's like how they talk to each other, how they see each other, how they interact. That's when I know it's working or not, where I'm like, oh boy, this is not happening here. And yeah, because that's that push pull again. It's when they start to, and that's verbally is for me is when that really starts to happen. So
yeah, very good point. Julie?
I think it varies by characters and by the story, and particularly the characters. There can be that verbal banter going back and forth, but then again, if it's a little bit maybe more serious or something, a little different setting, it could be something other than that. But it really is the snap, crackle, and pop, and you convey that through words. It was electrifying. There's a lot of physical things going on. Her hands are shaking, her legs are weak. There's so many butterflies bouncing around in stomachs. All these heart racing, pulse throbbing, all of those kind of things. So you have to find some descriptive words, and because you have to try to explain what's going on in that character's body and in their mind. And so it really could vary by character, as well as the conflict. It's like, why do I hate this person so bad, but yet I always want to be around them? What is that telling me? So I think it's kind of all the above too.
Why are they driving me crazy? Yes,
Right.
I think very
That's right.
very valid. And lastly, Georgia.
It's the banter, because the banter is what informs the sexual tension, and it's the sexual tension for me. I mean, it's got to be delicious, and it's got to be like, if I as a writer can't wait to get these people into bed, then I know my readers are going to feel the same way. And Melissa, I think you're great at the banter. I mean, you are like a master at the witty banter. So if that's what I aspire to, is like, okay, this kind of back and forth, like Leigh keeps using the phrase push pull, and it's perfect, because that's what it is. It's the push pull. And I feel like that's what sexual tension is the push pull. And you think about characters in TV shows that you always wanted to get together because they had that, the Rizzoli and Isles and Scully and Mulder, frankly. I mean, they had that push pull, that back and forth. And I think that it's tangible. It's like you feel like you could grab it, you can taste it. And when you have that, you're good to go.
Oh, that's well put. And thank you very much. I appreciate that. We have a question from AComp, which I've noticed in the chat bar, we've had several comments go by about a series. And so, and I know some of you have written series and some of you have not, but maybe aspire to in the future, or maybe that's just not your thing. But thinking about a standalone romance that you've written where a character's fine forever, sometimes those books really resonate with your readers. Would you ever consider taking one of those into series form? So that's the question that we have. So Georgia, I'll go with you first, because I know you have written a series, and then we can go down the line and talk about those of you who haven't, whether or not you would.
I think that the beauty of a series is that, so I have my puppy love romances, and there's 3 of them. And so in each book, there's a different couple, but you have the first couple, and then the first couple shows up in the second book, and they show up in the third book to let you know that they're okay, to let the reader know that they're okay. For me personally, I don't think that I could write a romance series with the same couple over and over. People have done it, and they've done it well. For me, in my brain, once they profess their love to each other, I'm kind of done with them. So I don't mind bringing them back in to say hey to readers as like a little Easter egg, but they don't really hang around much because I'm on to this next couple. And like I said, I'm not against that. People do it, and they do it well. But for me, I don't have it in my head. I want to move on to the next couple.
All right. Well, Megan, would you ever bust them up?
You totally would, Megan. You totally would.
I always said that I wouldn't write a series because they're actually very intimidating to me, and I give major props to every author who has tackled series before. But I have thought about it, actually, with Fake It Till You Make It. I thought about turning that into a little bit of a series, because I feel like there was a lot of characters to kind of play with. And like Georgia said, I wouldn't take the main characters throughout the whole thing I would do sort of like a spin-off. And I actually almost did, but we decided not to go with it. And Pretending in Paradise actually came out of what my idea was for the spin-off from Fake It Till You Make It, and turned into a whole different novel. So maybe one day, never say never, but it scares me. It does, it scares me.
Leigh, what about for you? Do you think that's something that you could ever do, is take one of your couples and expand into a series?
If I did romantic intrigue, perhaps I would feel that would be more sustainable. But like Georgia, I kind of, when they're together, I'm kind of done. But or I'd have to do something so egregiously terrible to them to break them up, because I worked so hard to get them together, right?
Be mad at you.
Yeah, like, so, it could be done, but I'm not quite sure. I prefer more of a series of like characters that build in different couples in different cities and stuff like that. That's more of my setting, so to speak. Yeah.
So it sounds like a maybe, but probably not. We'll see. We'll leave the door open.
Yeah.
Mary, coming to you next. Is that something you would ever consider?
I also think I find it intimidating, but I also have an outline on the desktop for a second story romance.
So it's hanging out in the background for you.
It's been hanging out. I've never read one like it, and I know I need to find them and read them first. But because I became sort of intrigued with the second chance thing, and I thought, and a friend said to me, "Okay, well, if you write the second chance, are we going to get to see the first one that didn't work?" And I thought, well, I don't know. Can we do it that way? Can we show them the second one first and then the first one? I don't know. So I have to think about this.
That's interesting. Like, go back and do a prequel, except that you know that it doesn't work. So
I know
that would be sad.
No, and I've been told we were not supposed to do that. So.
Oh my goodness. Julie, what about you? You've got a lot of couples to choose from. Would you ever revisit and start a series?
I wouldn't. I'm like Georgia. When I'm done with them, I'm done. As a matter of fact, I don't even remember who they are when I start the next book. I'm done. Both of my characters in my first book, Come and Get Me, did make a cameo in a subsequent one, but it was too hard. And because where are they now? What did I say about them before? What do they even look like, for crying out loud? I couldn't even remember that. So it's just, no, I'm done after the first one.
I think we got some across-the-board answers there, which makes it exciting and brings out our different unique features as writers. Let's talk a little bit about torture, which is a nice, fun segue. My mom read a book of mine recently, and she liked the book, but she wasn't sure that the couple should be together. So that brings the question.
Thanks, Mom.
That brings the question, is there such a thing as too much torture, where it's too hard to bring the couple back from something that happens in the book? And it's an interesting question. I think about it a lot. It's like, how far can we go, and do you have a line? What about you, Megan? Have you thought about that before, or have you ever had to pull yourself back?
Yeah. I would say definitely in Life and Death, I think I threw a lot of different things in there that would normally, I think, be a big old bold finish line for a couple. But I think I pulled them back. I think I did manage to maybe torture them just enough and not cross that line. And then also in What the Heart Remembers Most, there's a little bit of that too. And I've actually gotten a little bit of feedback on that one, where it was kind of like, I didn't think they should even try this again. But again, I think I tortured them just enough. So is there a line? Probably. Will I cross it one day? Most likely. I probably.
All right, Mary, what do you think about too much torture?
Well, I'm working on something like that right now, so I'll be finding out. I think I'm going to be playing with how far apart can I pull these two before I allow it to snap back. So I'll be finding out. I don't know. Never written anything like that before.
An experiment in progress.
Very good friends. Would be very good friends.
Perfect. What about you, Julie?
You know, Melissa, when you asked about torture in the book, I thought you were talking about the middle third of the book, I mean, look at everybody. So look at everybody's expression.
I'm right
When
there
you
with
talk
you.
about torture, it's the
I'm going to
middle
drink some
third.
gin for that.
Oh, yes, I see that. I see that, Georgia. You know, the first, you're like, in the beginning, you're going, and then at the end, you're wrapping it all up, and in the middle, you're like, I'm at 35,000 words. What do I say now?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But no, I haven't. I haven't pushed them. I'm sure there's a line, and it's a fine line. Those authors that do, it's a very fine line as to is it too far or not. So I don't think I've ever gone that far, but I do recall, I can't think of any specifics where I also thought, should they really be together? Who could do that or think that or forgive that? I couldn't. So it's just all varies, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Georgia, you've done some awful things to your characters.
I have, and I have a hard time with that because I think what happens is if I'm writing, if I'm happy with the book, if I'm happy with my writing, then that means that I like the characters, and so I don't want to do anything awful to them. But then you worry about the book being boring, and you kind of have to. You have to torture your characters. That's the point. I think that you have to be careful to not make somebody, you can make a character unable to come back from something, and you have to be careful of that. I mean, and that's a different animal than making them unlikable, because I've written unlikable characters before that my editor has gone, whoa. But characters make mistakes, and people make mistakes, and readers are unforgiving. And I know, especially in our community, there's like cheating is like a no. But
you've written multiple cheating books.
I have, because I find it's realistic. It happens. I know we hate it. I know we don't want to read about it, but if we go back to the whole realism thing, it happens. And I saw that someone in the questions asked about dealing with lesbian bed death, which is a thing. I'm sorry, it is. So you deal with these things, and then your characters make bad decisions, and they do stuff, and your readers don't want them to be able to come back, but you have to take a step back and think about if you're being realistic. And there's a fine line between being realistic and going too far, as Julie said, and over-torturing, and now your reader is out. So it's it's dicey for me, and I go around and around between not enough torture and too much torture. I haven't found the happy middle yet, the happy medium yet. I'm working on it.
It's a matter of raising the stakes
Oh my goodness.
for your readers too.
It is, yes.
As you continue to go. Now, Leigh, we haven't come to you with this question yet, so I'll bring it over. What do you think about the line and how far we can push it?
I'm a fan of the bring on the pain, but you know, there are, like Georgia said, there are lines, and there are things. So I'm a sort of a recent parent, and I was writing a character who was just not a bad parent, but not an abusive parent. And a friend of mine said, "Well, are you going to write a series with her?" And I was like, "No, I can't bring her back from that." You know, so for me it was that, but like for other people, and I'm like, but I could deal with somebody who is unfaithful. I was like, that I can bring back because I have a different. I understand how dark people can get, but you know, sometimes I don't want to write it. So
and people do come back from that.
Yeah, but yeah.
It's interesting. All right, I'm going to go to the Q&As now, and Cynthia's asking, and I do think this plays into the forever theme we have going. Are you ever writing and it just falls flat a little bit between the two main characters? And that's hard. I mean, if you're writing characters that aren't mixing well together, it's going to be hard to make that forever convincing. So her question is, how do you overcome that? I mean, do you go back to page 1? Do you scrap the book? Do you talk to beta readers? I mean, what's your method? I'm going to go to Julie first.
Again, I think it's in the middle third that it just kind of falls flat, and so you have to go back to the beginning. I reread a lot of things. You know, what is it that made them pop before? and yeah, you can ask your beta readers, and sometimes it's flat and you don't even know it until someone reads it and says, where is this going? Where, you know, they were just kind of wandering around. But that's primarily what I use, is I'll ask some of my beta readers about it, or I'll just go back to the very beginning and think about it. I've never had to scrap one, luckily. I know that because it's a ton of work, and then when you go, these people aren't going anywhere. If you think that and you work through it and work through it and work through it a variety of ways, and if they're still just not going anywhere, if you force it, then your editor will certainly tell you nothing's going on, and the book just won't do well. You just kind of know.
Yeah, I think that's very valid. What about you, Leigh?
I should post some of the things that came from my beta reader the last time. No, I don't get what's going on. Yeah, so I often find that I go back two scenes back, because that's when it's usually gone off the rails for me. And I'm like, oh, yeah, no, this is, but yeah, you just got to rework it sometimes. It's just go back in. And sometimes I have to walk away. I just can't look at it for a while because I'm just too close to it. And then I come back and I'm like, oh, I think I did all right here. Or, whoa, no.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's a great tip right there, is just getting some perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Megan.
I agree with Leigh. I have to walk away because I know it's happening as soon as it does. I was just writing something a couple months ago, and I caught myself, like, the characters were having a conversation about the grandfather's cane. That served no purpose. It was like, I stopped myself. I was like, what is happening right now? And I walked away from it. I was like, I need to walk away. Mm-hmm. I have a few really good friends, author friends. I vent, I get it all out, and then I just go back, I delete, I take a deep breath, and I think about what needs to happen, and I refocus. But sometimes it just happens. That's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, Mary, what about you?
Well, I have the luxury, I think, of working with a writers group. There are 5 of us, and they will tell me when something is not working, whether it's, falling flat or just plain old not working somewhere. They've made me rip things down to the studs in some cases and start building again, which is really good. But I'm also a fan of walking away from it, and I'm working on usually at least one other thing at the same time, so I can put that away and bring out the other, what I consider to be the toy, the thing I really shouldn't be working on, but I am, because it just takes my mind off the other. And that helps a lot.
All right, good tip. Georgia, your characters just aren't gelling. What do you do?
I think if they're falling flat, then I've lost the chemistry. I don't use beta readers, but it's interesting because I have, so Melissa and I talk to each other. We're very good friends. And while we don't read each other's work, I can send her a note and say, this is not working. And she'll send me suggestions, or she'll send me a note and be like, I'm not sure what's going on. And I'll send her suggestions. And sometimes it's just like, I think about it as being in my car and getting a little bump from the back. And then I'm like, oh, all right. Maybe I need to go in this direction. So for me, if my characters are falling flat, if the scene is boring, I have lost the chemistry somewhere. So I either go back and try to figure out where, or I just scrap that particular scene and start again. And I've gotten better as the years have gone on at not freaking out over it and going, oh my God, I need to start over again. I'll take a deep breath. Like Megan said, I take a deep breath and sit there and go, okay, how do I fix this? Because I can fix it. I know I can fix it. I fixed it before. So I think that comes with time, where you just go, all right, let's go back to who said studs? Somebody said taking it down to the studs. Let's go back to the studs in this scene and start over again and find the chemistry. And it's there. It's there.
Yeah.
I got to take notes from everything all you guys said. That was all great. I'm going, oh yes, thank you. Well, we've made it to 40 minutes in before we've touched on the topic of sex, but I think we probably should, because when you're talking about finding forever, especially in a romance novel, this sexual journey can be part of it, should the writer choose. And so let's explore that a little bit. How important is the sexual relationship for the couple? And Julie, I'm not sure, but I think you've written A Fade to Black, yes? The cave one, or their...
Yes, I have. And I'm not so sure I want to talk about sex, because my 20-year-old daughter's in the car here, but
Perfect.
I think, you know, it's everybody says, and I think everybody knows, it's got to be the right place at the right time and the right scene. If it's not, it's just gratuitous. I did write a book called, geez, my mind just completely went blank. But
One
it
of
was
those
set,
books.
one of those. It was, well, you know why is because it's set in the Colombian, in Colombia and in the jungle. Oh, it's called
That's what I
Because
was
of You.
thinking of.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's called
that's the
Because
one.
of You. So it's set in Colombia in the jungle, and I wrote it probably 7 or 8 years ago, and I was sitting around the table and I was trying to figure out what should I title this book, and my son said you should call it The Jungle Book. So in my mind, we call it The Jungle Book.
Jungle Book.
But, anyway, there is absolutely no sex in this book at all, and I was very concerned about it, and because you know, it's a romance and we write sex in our books and there isn't any, and I was really concerned about it, and when I sent it to my editor, I said, tell me what you think, and she said it's absolutely perfect, because the 2 women are held hostage by the FARC, the guerrillas, the FARC, and
It's hard to have sex,
you know,
when you're being held hostage.
Yeah.
it was hard to be interested when you're trying to like untie your hands and feet and worry about when your next meal's going to come from, and holding your bladder and things like that. So there wasn't any, but yet it was, and even the chemistry was there, but you had to be really careful, because in that situation, you're not going to be sexually attracted to somebody. You're fighting for your life. But again, it depends. Where does it fall? What do your characters do? Are they just having sex? Are they making love? Or are they fucking? What is it and where? So, but I was really concerned about that one, but there wasn't any issue at all.
So yeah, so it has to be germane to your narrative and your arc. And in your case, that's a
Absolutely.
great example.
Right. Absolutely.
So Georgia, for you, how important is that sexual relationship to the couple making it in the end?
Well, I think it's very important, and I think there are different ways of showing that. I mean, it depends on your characters, but for me, whether the characters have had sex with each other before or not, there's always a love scene that's different than the other ones. It's the love scene where they realize that they are in love with each other. And it's not just sex, and it's not just, I really like this person, let's see where this goes. It's, okay, this is different. My world has been rocked. Things are changing. My life is going to be different from here on out. And I think in a romance that scene is important, if you're including sex. For me, it is. And as I said, they can have sex before that. And sometimes I think the first time that they're together, you know, the first time is fumbly and it's weird and you're getting to know each other. And then it's the next time, because feelings have come into play now, and possibly love has come into play now, and you already know each other's bodies a little bit. And I think that particular scene for me is very important in my romances. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah, that's a great answer. Mary, what's your take on the whole thing?
That was probably the biggest learning curve for me when I came to writing this. I studied the genre for a couple of years first. And I learned a lot working with my editor, because I had some scenes that, you know, are long ago gone and scenes that she asked me to write while I was editing in December. And in my case, it was, you know, how often, when, and where is it placed? And the editor and I kind of had some, you know, set twos about where are we going to, you know, and how does this? Because in my case, that love scene, like Georgia described, comes first, and then the fumbling one comes later for a certain reason. So, and of course, she's fooling around with somebody else up in the front half of the book. So we get sex there, and went back and forth with the editor on dealing with this, trying to figure out how and where to put it. So it's still a learning curve for me.
And maybe for all of us, actually. We're all learning as we go. Megan?
As a reader, it's very important for me. In my books, in my writing, it's very important. But it all depends on what the book is about, who the couple is and everything, where the scenes are, how often those scenes come into play, the type of scenes. because you could watch a couple kind of grow together and get comfortable with each other. And, you know, some of the scenes are more frisky and then some of them are more sweet. It's very, very important to me because it tells a story in and of itself.
I think that's very true as well. Leigh?
I think intimacy varies from character to character. Some people talk through sex and other people don't. And so, and I agree with Georgia as well about that there's often another scene where it's like, whoops, we got feelings now. What do we do? And yeah, and Megan brings up some really good points about that. It's definitely important for me as a reader. I definitely like to read it. But yeah, no, I think that intimacy can be, I like it. For me, it's about the intimacy is really more and less about the sex in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah, and intimacy is a whole new thing, right? And it can change things a great deal. We only have about 3.5 minutes left, and I do think we want to hear about what everyone has in the works coming up soon. And so, Georgia, tell us what's next for you.
Next for me is a romance called Hopeless Romantic. That will be out in August, I believe. It is about a divorce attorney who is a hopeless romantic and a winner who does not believe in marriage.
Well done. Mary, what's next for you? You've got the first one coming out soon. Will there be a second?
Yeah, actually, I've got 3 or 4 of them outlined on my desktop.
There you go.
The one I'm working on goes back to a couple in their 30s and working on a sort of a journalistic problematic case in the city. And she falls in love with the person that they're pursuing.
All right, getting
the one that they're going
complicated.
after for the story. A little complicated, yeah.
Right? Yes. And Leigh, what do you have next?
My second one, Too Good to Be True, takes place in Providence, the same setting as the first one, and it's about Jen, who's a friend of Lindsay's, and she has a hookup at a wedding, and then that's it, and then she meets her hookup. Her hookup, Madison, is works at her son's school, and it goes on from there. Yeah,
complicated. Megan, what's next?
Well, I'm actually in the middle of a really big break right now. I just had What the Heart Remembers Most this month, and I don't actually have anything planned until a holiday book for 2021, not even for 2020. So I have I'm just chilling.
Yeah.
But quarantine has lent me a little bit of time to really just kind of like kick my feet up and think about what's next. So I do have an idea I'm playing around with. So who knows? Maybe it'll pop up between now and then. There's a possibility of it, but I don't know yet. Sure. So
we will stay tuned because now the suspense is there to find out. And Julie, what about you? I know you got this road trip first, but what after that?
Yeah, I've only got an hour left to go out of 19
You're almost there.
Down. Yeah, 19 down, 1 to go. My next book is called The Last First Kiss, and I just sent it to my editor a couple weeks ago, and it will be out in January. And it is about the widow of the first open lesbian Medal of Honor winner. And her friends take her to a lesbian resort in the British West Indies for 2 weeks of fun, sun, and sex. She's got all this pressure from her to make sure that she doesn't sully her wife's name, and so she's just under all kinds of pressure. And she goes to this lesbian resort where she can just cut loose, and no one knows her. No one will ever see her again. So it's called The Last First Kiss.
All right. Well, I think you guys have all given us lots to look forward to in terms of books coming out soon. And I very much enjoyed our discussion. I apologize that we didn't get to all the questions. We had so many, which I appreciate. We do have the Bookathon continuing. We have a couple more panels today. I want to say 2 or 3 that you should definitely tune in for. I will be tuning in as an audience member. And thanks so much to our panel and to all of you for tuning in today. It's a really nice break in the day when we get to do this.
Thanks for moderating.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Great.
Oh,
Thanks,
guys.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye. Have a great one.
You too.